I did a lecture a few years ago at a local college, and I said, when I moved here, and to some extent this is still true, although less so today, but I called it the guide dog truck theory of communication. Okay, you open up a website. When I moved here, there was a guy. Sometimes he had his wife, sometimes he had a family, but there was a guy. And then he had a truck, and it was an F-150 or an antique one or whatever. And then there was a dog. Sometimes it was a Labrador Retriever. Sometimes it was a German Shepherd. But that was what every single winery website was. I was flabbergasted because this is ludicrous, and I don't know, and honestly, it's the best industry with the worst communication I have ever seen.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Barrels and Roots podcast. I'm Sean Tracy, your host, and I have an awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
I'm Barbara Gorder. I live in Sonoma County on Sonoma Mountain. I am I'm a marketing consultant, and I also run the Consumer Wine Symposium.
Nice. How did you get started in the wine industry? How did you find this calling? Was it something magical, or was it just like that was what you were around and it was that's where it went?
Well, I mean, how did I get started in the wine business? I mean, I guess, I've been in the marketing business for a very long time. I came out of Chicago and I worked across major brands, Leo Burnett and DDB and mainstream brands. And I moved out to California about 15 years ago to be closer to family, for both myself and my husband. And I went to a conference, and it was the DTC Wine Symposium, and it was very, very different then. It was like 90% tall white guys in suits, and a handful of women. And I have worked in many, many, many different lines of category in business. I've worked in athletics. I've worked in CPG. I've worked in cars. There isn't anything I haven't sold, and so that was sort of how I got started in the wine business. And at first it was sort of a networking thing, volunteering for the conference, meeting people through that, because I have a history of branding and marketing and relating that to strategy and how it worked out for me in terms of packaging. So that's kind of how I got started in the business.
Well, what made you, with wine itself, was there anything that kind of hooked you about the wine, or do you love wine? I mean, this is because I'm assuming here, Talk to me about your relationship with wine.
I do love wine. And I was an art history major. I went to Northwestern and I was an art history major. And before I went to college, I was 18 and I got to go to a place called Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And I wasn't going there for the wine. I was going there for the history and for to see the cathedral and to understand sort of that part of the world in terms of history and art and what was going on. And someone brought me into a 2,000-year-old cave and gave me a glass of wine. That lit me up and turned me on. And, I'm from Southern California. It's like I drank a lot of, Gallo, Hardy, Burgundy, and Coors beer growing up. I didn't really know much of anything, and I certainly didn't know anything about that. And it's sort of, Châteauneuf is sort of a interesting place because I ended up in my first big wine trip to California in the 90s. I met Jason Haas's dad, who was just starting Tables Creek. It was brand new. And today I work with Jason Haas on the Wine Symposium. So I don't know, Châteauneuf keeps running through. So that's kind of how I came to wine. And then I worked for an advertising agency, and I was lucky to have an expense account. And so that was really cool because when you went places, you could eat in very nice restaurants and have very nice wines. And that was a subsidized process of discovery at that point was helpful.
That's awesome. Well, one of the things, there's a lot of cool things to unpack there, but that sounds absolutely magical, to be able to have that experience and to be able to, a 2,000-year-old cave and a glass of wine, that in and of itself is just a heck of a core memory right there,
So I'm just like a little Southern California beach girl who likes, surfing at Windansea and wearing crocheted bikinis at this point. I don't know anything. But when you tell me about a civilization that was there and that built that place, and then you have that associated with something that's sensorial, right? That's cool.
Yeah. I The other day, I was not other day, last year, or earlier part of this year, my wife and I were flying back. She was singing in Atlanta. And normally we from Southeast Asia travel east, go across the Pacific and then into California. But because we were going to Atlanta, the easiest flight was actually going west. And we flew over into Qatar. And from Qatar, we flew up across the Middle East, up across parts of Europe, and then over Iceland down into Atlanta. And when we were flying over all these regions, I just kept looking on the map of all these places and these names. And I just looked down and we flew over Muscat. And I was like, oh, that's where the grape for Muscat is from. It's from there, And then
Mhm.
like you're flying over these different regions, but you have these names. And it was just like, it's so interesting, so powerful. Because people forget that one of the oldest things, like they go to archaeological sites and they're finding like people were making wine about as far back as you can go. People were making wine, and we've had this
8,000 years of
relationship.
history. Yeah, so
Yep.
it's incredible. I think I had a friend whose son was an intern in Georgia, and he went out there. I mean, you look at
Oh,
the Georgian wine business, and Georgian
yeah,
wines are gorgeous. They're beautiful. And how they've been doing it the same way for 5,000 years and making them
yeah,
in the cuivres and all that. So so if you're a history geek like me, I mean, that's what I like to read in my spare time. So that's one of the things that is interesting to me. And you know, people will talk more about the status of wine in California, but I mean, think about how young we are in California, right?
yeah.
California wine business, really only goes back 100 years, not much. We're new babies.
Yeah. That's one of the things that's fascinating still to me. Living when I was, I grew up mainly in California, lived all over the US, but California is home. And, you go see an old historic building in California and it's like 100 years old, And like you're going to other places in the world. And I remember when I was in England and we were visiting my cousin's house in Wales, and he walked up and like they had the mantle over the fireplace, and he showed it to us, and like one of the beams in the house as well. And he's like, these were from ships in the time of Henry VIII. And I was just like, what? You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's. I went to Cambridge for graduate school, and so when you go to Cambridge, you still like eat with the dons, and they're still wearing their robes, and the eating hall was built by Henry VIII. So yeah, it's cool.
That's wild. I'm a
Yeah,
history major as well. I was a history major in college. And so, yeah, we are speaking the same love language here
totally.
for all things. But one of the things too is not everyone can geek out as much as I can, and a lot of people come into wine feeling intimidated, and they don't know necessarily is this whole thing for them. Um, Wine seemingly with this some of the newer generation has lost a bit of a connection. How do you think we can bring people back without without being like too much simplifying and dumbing it down? How can we kind of get people back into wine?
First of all, I think two things from up here. Okay, it's like wine. Wine thinks it can control. Okay. And what I mean by that is, okay, like think about the industry from a language standpoint and from an advertising standpoint. Wine's the only product where the industry or the business tells consumers how to describe it theoretically. In
Mm,
other words, if you're describing it like Nike doesn't do that, Apple doesn't do
no,
that. Their advertising agencies go out and look and see how people are using those products in the language. And you're starting to see that language change in the last 4 or 5 years with younger people coming in. So it's important not to be arrogant, because consumers are going to think about things the way they're going to think about things. And it's up to the wine business to let them in and honor them and say thank you. So it's
I
like,
love that. I
and
love
it's
that.
like, and I mean, for the first mostly 20 years of my life, it was white, red, or rosé. I mean, really, do people need to know a whole lot more? I'm not sure they
Right.
do. Um, I know a whole lot more because I want to, but I think it's
Yeah.
arrogant for us in the wine business to think about people that way.
Yeah. I love that. Like when I was in college in the Napa Valley, and I had a summer job at Meadowood, and my boss, I knew nothing about wine, and my boss pulled me aside and he's like, all right, we're gonna give you the rundown so you know how to sell this stuff. And he's like, try this. And it was just a white. And I mean, it wasn't bad quality white. It was a great white. I think it was a Chateau Montelena Chard. And like they're like, try this. And he's like, try this red. And and I was just like, wow, they're very different. He's like, what do you think might go with this one? And I was like, well, this one's lighter. Maybe, I don't know. I like on our menu, think about our menu. What might you tell someone that would work with this? I was like, I don't know, like a salad or one of these, something lighter. He's like, boom, it's your first pairing. And I was like, well, what else do I have to do? And he's like, not much. Think about if someone wants something heavier, maybe you recommend this one. But he's like, but honor where they're at too. He's like, don't overthink it. If they want to get a salad and have a glass of red wine, that's okay. That's where they're at. And he's like, just be cool with it. And if they don't have any idea and they're trying something out, just be accepting of them trying out something.
Yeah, I mean, my dad was a fan of rosé wine. He was in the Navy, and he was a fighter pilot, and he had spent time in the 50s in the south of France and traveling around the Mediterranean. And so he loved rosé wine. And then he and my mother spent most of their lives in California. Again, lighter food, fish, salads, So that's what he knew. And so he was rosé all day before his time. But so that's what I grew up drinking.
That's side note. Your father, who grew up drinking rosé and was a fighter pilot, talk about a cool story. Like, oh my goodness, we're not going down that path, but I want to talk to you about that someday as well, because that's awesome.
He had a great time in the Mediterranean. He served with Wally Schirra, who was one of the original astronauts, and they were in their young heyday, and they snuck a stripper onto a carrier for a CO's birthday, and they got in a lot of trouble for it when they were in Cannes. That's a true story.
Wow. Wow.
He's buried in Arlington today, and
Oh my
served for
goodness.
32 years. But we had a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And you know what? Celebrate. Every time from now on that I have a glass of rosé, that is popping to mind. And that's like such a cool association now for rosé for me. So,
well, we went to a late in the late 90s, my family, we came out to Napa Valley. My parents had never been to Napa Valley, and we came out for a wedding that we were invited to. And I decided to take my dad in for a tasting, because he liked wine in general, but he loved rosé. And so we're sitting there, and so they give him the rosé because that's the start of the tasting. And then they keep trying to give him other things. And he goes, but can I have the rosé? Anyway, so
I love
my
that.
point. But my point to you about people is give the people what they want.
Right?
Yes.
We were doing, I took my mom tasting. Oh man, that was fun. My mom is a lightweight and a half, and we went into this wine tasting, her and my wife, and after 2 glasses, I'm literally pretty much carrying these 2 women through the winery. But the funny thing is like, immediately both of them knew the wine they liked. And it was interesting because they tried a couple things, and they were like, both of them went, and I want a bottle of that. And it was just this really open experience. And the reason that they were able to they went and bought more bottles is because they went back around and they said, can I have another little sip of that? Can I have a little more taste of that? I think that I like that. And the person serving was like, you know what? That's not how we normally do it, but sure, I'd love to. And they both went and bought a couple bottles. And the thing is it was like, one of the things, I had great teachers growing up, and I taught children for a long time. And one of the things
Mhm.
that was so important to me was meeting a student or a person where they're at. We
Mhm.
always would like someone to be here. I've got a piano right over here. And my daughter, I've been working with her. She's been playing now for 4 years. And I mean, she started out, I put like colored like things on there. I wrote A, B, C, D, F, G, because that was where she's at. But today she sat down and I've gotten her different progressions of teachers, and she has two great teachers right now. And we found a photo though that showed the picture of the piano with all the stickers on it and all the letters. And I was like, "Do you remember this?" And she's like, "Oh my goodness, I remember you did that." And I said, "Would you want that now?" And she's like, "No, I don't need it now. But when I started, that was where I was at." And I said, "Yeah." And sometimes we don't need all the guardrails. Sometimes, sure, you learn the fancy vocabulary after a while. But in the beginning, sometimes you need a very, very simple breakdown: white, red, rosé, and bubbles. Like, hey, can we keep it that simple, you know?
So that's cool, right? And then you go to the next thing because, like, maybe somebody brings you something like an Albarino, and you happen
Mhm.
to like shellfish or seafood, and it pairs beautifully. And I remember when somebody brought that to my house one time. I had never tried it. I love to cook. I'm very involved. I have a cooking group. Blah blah blah. And somebody brought that, and I was like, wow. That I was living in Chicago, and there was a place called Sam's Liquors that was like, at the time, it was in a terrible neighborhood, but they had the best wine shop in Chicago.
That's
And I
awesome.
went in, and someone brought it from Sam's, and I said, and he goes, this guy who was their top salesman, he goes, "Tell Barbara I sent this to her. She needs to try it." And because I was
Mhm.
having fish, and I was like, ever since then, I've been an Albarino fan. So you learn those things along the
Yeah,
way.
I love that. And one of the things too is it's like it's a journey. But I want to ask you this: like, some people don't really get wine, and like, well, go back a second. Like, wine is, we talked about this, the historical side. Like, wine is this thing that carries a lot of history, place, like the agriculture. There's human effort, everything. It's like a story in a glass.
Mhm.
But why do you think that even matters in a world that's moving faster? Everything's digital. I mean, I can't even look at my Instagram or Facebook or any of my social media without having just AI generated videos everywhere. Like, why do you think something that's
Mm.
so deeply connected to people and this art is so important still?
Well, I mean, first off, we've already talked about how we're both history geeks. History matters. I mean, Heather Cox Richardson is one of the biggest writers today, right? And she writes Letters from an American, is something that we'll look back on during this turbulent time in history, and she writes a point of view. So she takes it from the historian view. Ken Burns, who's just come out with like, so history
Yeah.
matters to the public. Does it matter to 100% of the public? No. But I mean, think about it this way. I had somebody run the numbers for me one time to figure out how many consistent wine drinkers there are in America. Somebody who drinks wine at least once a week.
Mm,
And that's probably not more than 15 million people.
mm,
Okay. So think about that, because and then what you want to do is expand that tent. You want to grow the category, right? That's the most
mhm.
important business piece that we have to do. How are you going to grow the category? And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but that's why history matters, because it's not for everybody. It's,
Yeah.
it's, it's not. Wine matters. It's not for everybody. And it has an enormous amount of competition in this day and age. I mean, and that's something that the wine industry absolutely needs to grapple with. Growing up in California, we had beer, we had wine, we had soft drinks. Now you have everything from kombucha to, CBD beverages to, I mean,
Mhm.
the beverage category has exploded. So, what does the wine business need to do? They need to
Yeah.
communicate and advertise.
And they do, and they need to figure out, not just advertise, but learn the way that you can connect to a new generation, connect to a new type. And this is, I had Ed on that was from a Tank, and like I found him because they had this advertisement that just hooked me. It was
Mm.
this. it was like they were doing this really cool video that seemed like it was James Bond or something, running through this thing, and
Really?
I'm just like, dude, I don't know what they're selling, but I am watching right now.
They've been doing such a successful thing over at Tank. I mean, every single, one of their bottles that, has like a Volkswagen van looking over a beach in California. I keep it in my kitchen because it reminds me of my parents. My parents lived out of a Volkswagen van for 30 years and traveled around the country. So it's like evocative of my parents. But they have like art from different artists. They have like, it's not the rules. It's not the same rules. And that's what it takes, is the bravery to try new things and do different things in order to stand out. The piece of advertising they're talking about in that promotion was wildly successful for Ed. I mean, so doing things differently is a good idea.
I love that. I love it. And it because one of the things too is like with the doing things differently, you've seen how brands try to sell wine. In your views, what stories should we be telling about wine that we often overlook or ignore? Because, I tend to feel like maybe we're telling some of the wrong stories right now. Or, I
We're
mean,
telling the same story over and over and over and over and over
100%.
again. This is the
100%.
problem. I did a lecture a few years ago at a local college, and I said, when I moved here, and to some extent this is still true, although less so today, but I called it the guide dog truck theory of communication. Okay,
Ooh.
you open up a website. When I moved here, there was a guy. Sometimes he had his wife, sometimes he had a family, but there was a guy. And then he had a truck, and it was an F-150 or an antique one or whatever. And then there was a dog. Sometimes it was a Labrador Retriever. Sometimes it was a German Shepherd. But that was what every single winery website was. I was flabbergasted because this is ludicrous. And I don't know. And honestly, it's the best industry with the worst communication I have ever seen. I adore.
Right.
No, I'm serious. It's like
No,
there's
I
not.
100% agree. I
It's.
100% agree.
I'm sorry, but it's shocking how bad it is. I mean, it's like, I did a piece about it. It's like multicultural table of people cheering. There's the sunset over the mountain. There's I mean, these are tropes that are like so tired. This is not what people want. Pictures of empty tasting rooms that the interior designer shot that somebody put up on a website or in a social media post, and they thought it was a good idea. You need concepts. You need ideas in order to sell things. This is a truism of the business. So that's just what we need to do. I think it was sort of, I hate to use this example and I hate to pick on them, but I mean, it's like, look at the recent thing that's being done in Santa Barbara. Let's go. Really? This is your whole idea? It's like, you're going to put that out there? It's like, come on, folks. It's better than, we know you want the consumer traffic. Get somebody in there who's a professional who can do communication. I mean, it's just, it's like the 1950s, a guy in front of a Rolls Royce. I'm not making this up. It's like, anyway.
No, you're spot on. There was one of the things that you pointed out earlier is that companies like Nike, they listen. They listen to what's going on. There's a lot of social listening that's done. And I feel like the wine industry has not listened. They've listened to the pundits. They've listened to the people that they've hired to tell them what they want to hear. And yet they're not listening to the consumer as much, And it's like one of the things too. Like, let me give an example. When you talked about the truck, guide dog truck, I've seen that. And I've seen the advertising. Like, you go for anything Napa or Sonoma branding. You go into and this is one of the trends. I lived in Napa and I grew up in St. Helena through high school and college. And when you would go into the stores, they were original. They were like very unique stuff. It was like people that had their own little shops, you know. It was like a guy on Main Street, St. Helena, that had this VHS store, and he rented out movies. And the cool thing is he knew all of the movies. Steve. Can't remember the name right now, but Steve's was the hardware shop. But this guy knew Peter's Video, I think. He knew every single movie that was in that place, and he was great like that. And he was just from there and so interesting. And yet now, all the shops in St. Helena have all of these like Napa trinkets that are just like, they have either the mustard flowers or grapevines, and it's just
Live life, love, drink wine, something like that.
yes, like some generic thing, or like some like oh man, one of the ones that kills me is the towel that's got the wine circle on it. And they're just like, and you see these things, and you're just sitting there going, "Who buys this stuff, man? This is not what is going to draw people in." Versus, you know, one of the best experiences I had in the Napa Valley. Endless number of small restaurants that are there that are absolutely phenomenal, with great people, great conversations. I had so many conversations with amazing like people that were just like locals that were like, dude, you know what? This is what I would try. This is where I would go. And then going out like next to Lake Hennessy, out behind St. Helena, and just we had a bottle of I can't remember what it was. I think it was someone had given us a bottle of Contessa, and it was wild. My best wine story is going out by this lake and having a beautiful bottle of Contessa with my friends, you know, middle of the summer. Because what I'm getting at, and just I stepped away, my daughter came up and asked for, where's the remote for the air conditioner? And I said, okay. But while I stepped away, my thoughts solidified that one of the things that I think people are getting wrong is wine isn't just about the trucks, the men, the dogs. It's about experiences. It's about people together, and it's about bringing people together to share these common experiences. You know, and I think that there's got to be some better stories that we can tell.
Yeah, and I'm, you know, a couple of things like. I want the wine industry desperately to stop segmenting people in terms of age. I want them to band together in terms of psychographics, and we're going to be doing that at the DTC Wine Show. I'm bringing out Mike Siska from Chicago, because we know everybody's birthday does not mean, you know, stop talking about it. Is Gen Z different, and boomers and Gen X and millennials? Yeah, there's some core characteristics, but it's not what divides us, but what unites us that people need to figure out. And that is really important. And I want people to desperately to stop doing that. Just because you have access to people's birthdays, stop doing it. Yeah. It's dumb. And the CPG business hasn't done it in 25 years. So why are we doing it as an industry? So that's number one. Number two, I think people have to think about what stories, if you look at ads that are classic ads, whether you have somebody that you admire like Nike, or somebody that, you know, Apple, or some of a big brand, start thinking about what is those stories. Like, they remember when they did the ad about Colin Kaepernick, right? And how great Colin Kaepernick was, you know, because of who he was and what he did. So they have all these people. They're not selling Colin Kaepernick. They're selling an idea that says, this guy's brave, he has principles. So when you're selling wine, you are not selling what's in that bottle. You're actually selling what's the idea that you stand for and what makes you different. I mean, so what was the number one wine last year? Do you know? I do not. The number one launch of last year.
I have no idea. Tell me. Now
Aaron
I'm itching.
Told me it's pineapple chili wine.
Really?
Yes.
That's awesome. That's right.
It is. It's from Stella Rosa. And people, and this goes for, like, we'll talk about like inviting people in. I don't care if people like that. If they brought it to my house, I'd actually try it. Why not? Stop being such snobs, and stop it with like, remember when Aveline came out, and those ladies came out and they're making a boatload of money. They've gone from 5,000 cases of organic wine to over 200,000 with an idea that relates to the beauty industry that all women understand, which is clean beauty equals clean wine. all the wine people, and I have friends who are like this, and they were like, "Oh, that's terrible. You can't say that, blah, blah, blah. Stop it. Just stop it right now." It's
Yeah,
just like,
right. People are doing it, and like that's the thing. Like when coming from Napa, like I'm not a huge cab fan. Like, and you'd say
I'm
that
not
to
either.
people.
I
Yeah,
prefer
I'm
Syrah. If I'm gonna drink like a heavy red wine, then Syrah would be my choice.
100% me too. I'm with you on that. And like, no, I'm not. If someone gives me a bottle of cab, I'm like, sure, let's go have some fun with this. But that's not my first choice. I love Pinot. I love Pinot Noir. I love I love lighter reds, man, and stuff that's just easier on my palate. And just because that's me. And yet people, when I tell them that, they're just like, really? And you're just like, yeah, everyone's got a different flavor that they enjoy.
And one of the things that I got a note from a guy in British Columbia, and he's coming down to the wine symposium in January, and he's got like 100 points wines out of the Okanagan Valley. I can't wait
That's
to
right.
try it. I
Yeah.
mean, that's cool.
Yeah, that's
But it
awesome.
should be to go back to a little bit of what we were talking about. This is sort of all over the place a little bit, but the
Oh, I
wine
love
business.
conversations that are all over the place.
No, I am too. But ADD is my friend. So no, all the best people have it.
Yeah.
But the wine industry is built on a very conservative business, which is farming. And farming is a hard business. It is not a creative business. It is a tough business. And a
Yep.
lot of people who came up, that's how they came up. And the tropes that we've been discussing are things that have worked in the past. They're not working as much anymore. I would say that the other two things that are contributing to difficulty is the price point. I think,
Yep.
discovery is hard when you have that. There are ways to do it, but that's hard. It's, used to be able to belly up to the bar, have an inexpensive tasting, having those experiences, and coming to Sonoma or Napa Valley is a lot more expensive than it used to be. That's hard. And given that 30% of that traffic is coming out of the Bay Area, and
Yeah.
then I think the virtual competition. I see all these crazy things, the doom cycle in wine writing, and people wonder why they
Right.
can't make money and get gigs. Shut up. It's like, here's the basic. It's like I was in history and art. Okay, but here's a basic fact of economics. If you go from 7,000 wineries to 11,000 wineries in 5 years,
Yeah.
what do you think is the outcome of that? Well, I will tell you, you have more than enough wine, and you probably need to do marketing in order to do that, because you can't differentiate. There's too much competition, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like they want to find a Gen Z isn't drinking. But wait, it is drinking. There's neo-prohibitionists. There's the rise of fat drugs. I mean, all this like bullshit. I'm sorry, but it's
No,
like
for sure.
there's a lot more people doing it. There's a lot more choice for consumers. Consumers have a choice, and let's go. I mean, look at what's doing well. Organic is doing
Yes.
really well. It's up 8 or 9% year over year, right? Okay, I wonder what that is. It's like younger people, and we used to do at the conference. We used to do this thing where it was like people who were 45 plus didn't mind it, but they wouldn't pay more for it. Younger people will.
Yeah.
Look at who got on that bus like in the 80s, Fridge. So
One of the things is, I also think too, like you can get into that analysis paralysis. You can overthink things too. And like, you can think, well, it's this is the problem, and this is the, shut up and just figure out what people like. My wife, we do music. She's a singer here in Vietnam, and we were sitting there and, we were looking, oh, well, how is TikTok changing music? How is this changing? Like suddenly we just both were like, or we can figure out what are people enjoying that you're creating right now and lean in on that. And we figured it out. Like her epic diva style songs, kind of a Celine Dion mix, were what the shows were requesting, what her fans loved, what we got views on. And we were like, all right, let's do more of that. and just not complain, not sit there and people are listening less. No, that's not it. It's just that we haven't figured out what to lean in on. We haven't figured out where to kind of refocus our attention. And I think that's something to think about too, because also one of the challenges I think with the industry as well is that it's become hyper focused on certain segments. The super luxe is an area that is, like these prices have gone up, up, up. And yet wine throughout the rest
And
of the world is deeply human. It's an everyday thing that people have, oh, hey, you have this with my dinner. And it's like, I keep describing it as like if an industry completely ignored all of the other segments, like you worked with cars earlier. Well, a Honda Civic is a great little car, as is a a Hyundai or something like that, or a small sedan, American sedan of some sort, but they're not flashy. But what if the entire car industry said, you know what, we only want to focus on the Bugattis and the Lamborghinis and that. And we're just going to forget everything else. And I mean, and again, it's not that the Bugattis and Lamborghinis, those cars are amazing. They are wonderful. They are awesome, as are these high-end bottles of wine. I love them. They're delicious and wonderful, but they're not the entire market. And I think that like that's one of the things too is like you rule out large segments of the population if you're only selling bottles that are $500.
well, I mean, it's like let's all stop using the words "the wine business," okay?
I love that.
Because H&M and Chanel both sell sweaters, but people don't use those two different business enterprises in the same sentence. Meanwhile, Rob and Laura Schurmeister, who produce about 1,000 cases and are down the street from me in Glen Ellen, and the Gallows both make wine, but they're in different businesses, and they
Yeah,
have different concerns, and
I
they
love
have
that.
different challenges. But you know, they both make great wines, but they're different. They're different, and they should be
Yeah,
marketed differently and spoken about differently. Those are different businesses, but the wine industry stubbornly clings to this. Like, I don't know. I was having this conversation with Rob McMillan about this, and I was saying, listen, you absolutely have to think about how are we treating this. You cannot. I have friends who are outside the wine business who call me up and they go, "Are you okay? Because I read all these stories. What the hell?" And the fact of the matter is that I can tell you, I know people who are doing really well, who are up
yeah,
10% year over year, 15% year over year, 20% year over year. The Lux wine business is hot right now, hotter than it's ever been. But look at the bifurcation of the economy in America, right?
yeah,
So there are people in the billionaire and millionaire class who are up there and they want to buy $110 bottles of Chardonnay. And those people are selling out. But and that's fine. Good for them.
yeah,
But are there people that are doing affordable? Yeah, and I see people doing second label to even where the mid-range so they can bring people up. In fact, I'm working on
yeah,
a product right now for the couturiers that's like that. And so it's like, how are we going to be able to like bring people into the fold at a more, how are we going to get them there with organic with a $25 bottle price, at retail?
yeah.
And,
I love that.
so I think striation in the market, there's a place for everybody, but you got to figure it out.
Yeah,
And I think that what this correction in the wine market, I hope what I see it do. I mean, one of the things we're doing at the conferences, we're talking about cost of acquisition. I did a
yeah,
budget workshop last year, and I was saying that cost of goods, and you go to any winemaker and you just say, "Hey, how much does it cost to make a bottle of your wine?" And that winemaker will tell you with, the label, the corks, the glass, the grapes. He'll be able. Is there any marketing dollars in there to sell your wine?
mm,
Most of the time, no.
wow,
When I found this out, it was shocking. You would be fired from any mainstream company in America who does not include a marketing budget of some type. I don't care what it is that you're doing, but you can't just produce this thing and then just send it out and hope they'll come. So at the end of that budgeting, saying when I was telling people how they should budget and do marketing plans and stuff, and I'm from the creative side, believe it or not. Look, here I'm doing budget. I said, okay, so everybody knows what customer acquisition cost is. I had in a room of 70 people, I had one lone guy in the back who knew what it was. And I said,
Wow.
and I came out of that and I said to a friend who's a very famous, well-known business, and I said, you know what your CAC is, right? And he goes, well, we do all our work in-house. And I'm like, that was not the answer, dude. So when I say cost of customer acquisition, so my point is COGS, customer acquisition, marketing plans. These are baseline business things that people in any other business understand. And when you think that the industry isn't doing well, it's not about whether young people are or aren't drinking wine. It's how are you approaching business and thinking about it strategically as much as anything else.
Yeah. Well, which leads into I want to talk about to DC and the DTC Wine Symposium. It's coming up in January.
Yeah.
What conversations do you think the wine industry most needs to be having right now at a gathering like this?
We're going to talk about a lot of different things. I think that we've all been out in the woodshed for a good long while now, and I think it's start talking about the future. I think you
Mm.
saw a lot of, I talked to Carmen Castaldi, who was telling me that like 30% of the grapes didn't get used this year. People have been tearing up, vineyards in Lodi. I think we've all been in a dark place for at least a couple of years. And I think it's time to start preparing for the future. And so I want it to be about the future. And that's where a lot of the content goes. It's going to talk about new channels. It's going to talk about OTT and CTV. The democratization of media in this country right now for small business is unbelievable. So people, there needs to be a wine campaign that comes out of California. We're going to do something for WIDs and bids and talk about the pluses and minuses of that. But how people connect with consumers, segmentation, and then different ways of doing things. And that's
Mm.
mostly what I want to do. It's like about the future and doing different things. There's a lot of, I would say, through lines for the conference are collaboration. The wine industry is also, I'm using the wine industry again, has never really been a collaborative group of people. They have been, whether they're small or whether they're large, they don't tune into each other, they don't partner together. So we're seeing national collaborations like Wine Atlas, which is like Janie Brooks, or from Brooks, Janie Hoyk from Brooks Winery, Jason Haas, folks up in the Finger Lakes, folks in Virginia. But it's basically if you're a member of Topless Creek, you can have permissions in 8 different wineries all over the country. Wow, how cool is that? Down to somebody who's small and doing it in West County. So collaborations that way. It's really interesting to me that that's where people are finally going, and it's long overdue. And I think collaboration is going to be a theme. And I think the future and how we're going to get there, the democratization of media. People can do AI ads. People can do things themselves, love it or hate it. I love it personally. I mean, I understand there's a downslope, but as a creative person, man, there's so many different ways I can do things,
There's so many tools. There's so many tools now that you have to play with. And like, I love the idea of, there is this democratization of media and people have access to channels that they might never have been able to have. I keep thinking about the Mountain Dew guy. And I don't know if you've been seeing this ad campaign, but Mountain Dew has the most genius ad campaign right now. And it's this kid who just shows up at all these strange locations, red carpets with a can of Mountain Dew. He hands it to people. He walks in behind people, hands it to people. They're like, dude, that's the Mountain Dew guy. I think he's here. And he tries to act like he's not with the company, but he just hands people Mountain Dew or Dr. Pepper, not Mountain Dew, Dr. Pepper. He just hands people Dr. Pepper. And yeah, it's this, and people are starting to like catch on, like this is something new, and it's they obviously, and it's like probably one of the cheapest ad budgets in the history of ad budgets. He just walks into like this location and hands people Dr. Pepper, but it's for this time and age in a way that's able to maximize the media type right now. But I want to ask another question. Direct to consumer is often discussed in terms of like um, logistics and margins and platforms, but at its core, DTC is all about human connection. What excites you most about how DTC can help wineries rebuild trust and relationship with wine drinkers?
I think that there are several different, we get a really broad variety of people that come to the conference. About 40% of them are sort of owners, executives, decision makers. But we also get a lot of people from hospitality, and then we get
Mm,
marketing people. So it's a little bit all over there. But how can we do that is by creating these environments, and whether that's architecture or personal hospitality or a differentiation of experience, it's all got to be cool. It can't just be, okay, and here's your pre-poured tasting, so we can help people come up with that. The other thing that we're doing is that we're seeing a lot of is how people are going to different markets and bringing their products to different markets in order to get more people, because there's been a loss of visitation in Northern California, right? And so I have people who tell me some of their top markets are Chattanooga, St. Louis, Tallahassee, Florida. Like, people are going out and going to these places and creating experiences because those people don't have access to the wines that we have here. And so I'm seeing that as something, creating streams of revenue. There's some really interesting partnerships. Um, Drinks put together Quince, which is a popular online retailer, with Dom Perignon. How are people creating a fourth tier channel where you have all the regulatory and compliance issues solved for you, but you're also using it with a retailer? So that's super fresh. And they're doing it with small people too, not just Dom. So it's to me, it's about how do you create these business opportunities and creative opportunities and have people teach people at the conference. And to be honest, one of the most productive things is having people there talking to each other. It's not just about the sessions. It's like, what are you doing? How are you dealing with this? And that collaboration is really, really important. I'd say it's probably one of the top things is that connection and collaboration.
that's awesome. Well, one last question for you. For someone on the fence about attending the DTC Wine Symposium, whether winemaker, uh, marketer, or storyteller, what would you say that they'll walk away from more clearly after they've attended this symposium?
We try and make all of the sessions actionable. So we give people top takeaways. We don't just have people go blah, blah, blah. This year we're doing boot camps, where we're actually going to teach people how to do their own media campaigns on CTV. If you're a small mom and pop and you've never done a meta campaign and you wear 16 hats, we'll teach you how to do that. So it becomes a teaching opportunity for you. Um, and I think that the ticket, albeit not inexpensive, is an investment in the future of what you want to do with you and your team. And, we have people literally who are coming who make less than 1,000 cases of wine. And then we have people from Jackson and Gallo. And so I think it's a place to be with your peers. And I think that you can learn a lot.
I love that. Well, where can people look up and find out more about you and the DTC Symposium?
My business is Undisclosed Location, or unlo.com, unlo.com. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. Reach out. I would love to hear from you. You can get your tickets. The agenda is on the website, dtcwinesymposium.com. And we would love to see you there. Just reach out and give us a shout. See you in
That's
Monterey,
awesome.
January 20th to the 22nd.